Yes, aye.
Stephanie,
Here.
George.
Yeah, aye.
Let's see, who else do I have here? Jack,
Nate's here. I'm here.
Nate, Jack,
Here.
Sarah,
Here.
and myself present as well. Great. We're gonna go over the minutes and then we'll say hi to our other committee that's with us. So has everyone had a chance to read and look over the minutes from the last meeting, which was November, I think 15th perhaps? 16th rather. Any questions concerning those minutes?
Brian, when were those sent?
Those were sent on the 17th. Oh, did you not get them?
I didn't get them either,
I don't
Brian.
remember seeing minutes.
In fact, I looked for them today and couldn't find them.
You know what? I wonder if Beverly, I'm not sure everyone knows, Beverly has stepped down as for taking notes for us for these meetings. It's my fault. I guess she didn't send them to everybody. I thought she did. Why don't we'll postpone a vote on those until next meeting then. My apologies. So we have the Capital Budget Committee with us. The members of that committee, I think, are pretty much all here. Sandy Fife is the chairwoman, so I think I'd turn it over to her so she can give the presentation. I know that everyone got a copy of that presentation in advance. So Sandy, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight. We are here to give our preliminary budget recommendations for capital that we did present last week to the Board of Selectmen. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. The first two slides are not new to you. I think for the public's sake at home, we usually outline the process each year. This year was a unique year. We got started a little bit late due to everything that's going on with COVID-19 and the economy. So we had to move pretty quickly. We finally received the recommendations on October 29th. In October 29th, we started our review. We waived actually foregoing individual meeting with the departments at their locations this year due to time, because that usually takes several weeks. And we did meet all together with each department to do our recommendations. So just so you know what our time frame, normally we start in September. As I said, we didn't get started this year until October, and we had it only till December 1st to make our recommendations. But many of the items that you're going to see tonight are items that you saw last year. We also, on the last slide, we welcome the FinCom or the public to attend any of our meetings. We always like input. So this year we received, we reviewed 60 total requests for $21.7 million. And we recommended approximately 31% of those. I can't, with the pictures, I am having a hard time. Let me see if I can move this, seeing the slide. Pat.
Yes, it's pretty clear. He recommended 31% of the overall capital requests and 26%. Yes.
These numbers, this is last year's presentation.
No.
Yeah, that's,
Oh my gosh.
I
Well, stop
that
that share.
Looks pretty similar, but it looks very similar, and the numbers are pretty similar also.
They are. Oh my heavens. How did I do that? Thank you, Sandy. So
Oh,
sorry.
you're welcome. You're welcome. I tried to adapt at the beginning, but when the numbers got different, that was hard. So while she's looking for that, just go through some of the challenges that we have found over the last several years, which is usually at the end, but Some of the challenges that we run into as we go through the requests that some of the capital that we receive are actually reoccurring items. And you'll see that as we do our presentation. We hope someday that we're in a good financial position where we're able to take some of the levy money and put it back into the operating budget to fund smaller capital items so they don't have to be bundled and presented to us as capital. And other
Hey,
items.
Sandy, could I pause you for just 1 second? I'm so sorry.
Sure.
This is Stephanie Cox, Vice Chair.
Hi.
Of course.
I just have a quick question for you, Sandy. So I was a little confused with what we got emailed out in terms of the memo and then the spreadsheet. The memo did have FY19 dates in it, but it looked like it had more recent information. So I want to be able to kind of follow along to whatever you're, about to present on. So I
have the
don't know if
memo
you
in front
happen
of
to
me.
know if that.
I don't know what you're referring to as far as FY19 dates.
She was assistant town administrator. Now I remember Dennis.
I have the memo. in front of me. Can you give me an example?
The date
Yeah,
of the meeting is December 2019. December 4th of 2019, the Capital Budget Committee 2021
She
recommendation.
applied to be on the FinCom.
Who?
Sandy.
She did.
The memo I have says the date is December 1st, 2020.
Oh, right. So we just got sent the wrong memo then. We just thought the date was perhaps wrong because we did recognize that the date was wrong as well as the chair was wrong. So we just don't have the correct memo.
I guess not.
Great.
Well, we'll be
That's
glad to
good.
forward that to you.
That's fine.
Once we get to the PowerPoint, I think a lot of things will come into,
I think that's more important.
yes. The memo basically just outlines the PowerPoint. On the Excel sheet that you got, did you get the correct Excel sheet?
Yes.
I believe so.
Okay. Well, how about the 5-year and the 10-year plans with the reconciliation?
Same sheet.
Right. That's the same spreadsheet, correct? Right. So yes, we did.
Okay, good. That's good. Sorry about the memo.
That's okay.
All right.
This stuff must have been in my pocket, my shirt or something. I don't know.
It has to be in your shirt because there was nothing else in the dryer.
Nate, if you could mute your mic, please. Although we are interested in what's in your shirt.
In the dryer.
In the dryer as well.
All right, so how are we doing on finding that PowerPoint? Would you like to do something else that's on your agenda and give us a few minutes, or?
I think that's a good idea. Why don't we do that? So, Dan, we had some budget transfers that you had requested, so maybe we can do that while we're waiting for those PowerPoints.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just sent the transfer document to Pat to post. It's from Carl Von Home. And he's asking for, he had an article back, I think, a couple of years ago for what's referred to as solar pond aeration systems. And that equipment is no longer being manufactured, so that money is available. Normally on an article, we could let it expire and go into free cash. But in this particular case, what he's looking to do is take the $18,218 and transfer it to his shellfish account so that he can do a shellfish relay in the spring. So he needs to acquire some money soon to be able to place the order for the shellfish. So that what had happened, so that you know, that money was originally in his operating budget last year. However, he did not place the order before the end of the fiscal year, so we were not able to encumber that money, because you can't encumber previous year's money over unless it has a contract and you're supposed to actually have the goods delivered by the end of the fiscal year. So I told him that because that had missed, we would look to see if there was an available article, and he was able to find one, and he's asking for a transfer from something that is no longer available to him to the shellfish account.
Any thoughts on that? Any questions? Stephanie?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So Dan, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that I understand. So the account that it's coming from, the solar pond aeration, is that something that would have been appropriated in this fiscal
No, it
year,
goes
or it's
back,
something that was done in previous years?
Yeah, it's a previous year article that had been approved by town meeting. And that equipment had, the manufacturer subsequently went out of business. So that equipment became not available to us. So the money had never gotten spent.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's
So
one of those
normally
things
with articles that
is,
go unspent, in 2 years, the town charter or bylaws require something to be done, either be transferred or be reauthorized, or if not, they'll be retired and go back to free cash. So this is one of those items that any one of those three options would be available.
yeah, that's what I was asking, if it was one of those items. So it's somewhere around 2 years old
Yeah,
in terms of an appropriation?
yeah, and he has no use for it because it was tied to the solar pond aeration system that's no longer being manufactured.
Okay, and I think solar pond aeration has something to do with phosphorus in ponds.
Yeah, I think
but
that's to make it more oxygenated.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
To oxygenate the water, I believe, is the reason for it was a like much like road signs now come with a solar array that power road signs. This would have been the same kind of system. It would have been a solar powered aerating system for whatever water body he wanted to put it into.
So can we expect Carl to come back to us with a different request related to trying to solve that problem if the technology
I
is no longer
believe that
available?
there was an alternate method, or the plan for whatever he wanted to do with that. He doesn't need it right now, so it's not in the operating budget. He didn't say that he needed to do anything other than that. It was he needs to focus on the shellfish relay so that he can get that off the ground for this upcoming season.
Hey, Dan, just a little background. Carl was able to get from an alternative manufacturer, an aerator, and it was a lower cost aerator. So this money is left over. So he had a larger ask. So now he's using the leftover funds to help out with the shellfish.
Okay, thank you, Ed. And so then I guess my other question is in terms of the shellfish. So this is money that hadn't been in his operating budget, or you mentioned something about the timing of it being off from him being late to.
Come on, guys, don't do this.
I can help with that as well. So what happened, as Dan indicated, he was not able to spend the money in FY20. He didn't have a contract or a way to spend the money for several months because of COVID. So what we do in those cases, as Dan indicated,
Okay, thank you,
we
Ed.
close it out to free cash.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments about that? I actually have a question. So either Ed or Dan, if we didn't allow this money to be transferred, it goes back to free cash. Is this shellfish initiative already something that's been approved to be undertaken, or is this money that is in need for something that's already been approved and has a go ahead to be done? Or is this something we don't even talk about? Do we not make decisions on that?
My understanding, he said to me, was that if he didn't have money available, there wouldn't be much of a shellfish season next year. And that would be a problem.
I agree. Thank you. That's all I needed to know. Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess what we're going at is, do we have a chance to approve this before and chose not to? and chose to spend it in the manner intended. Now we can't spend it in the manner intended, but we're going to put it into this previously not chosen option. When I assume there were other town needs that were not provided for. Essentially, I'm not opposed. Are we talking about a large amount? Maybe answer that for me.
$18,218. So as you
All right,
might
so we're
recall,
talking chump change.
Carl was trying to get this done for last fiscal year, but he ran out of time.
Okay, my concern is that, we're going to spend it for something that wasn't approved, just simply because something was approved, didn't get spent for, but there were other departments who were looking for funds that were not able to get them. But if we're only talking about 18,000, I'm not interested. I mean, I'm not concerned.
Can we get a motion to either approve or?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Robert.
Okay, I just want to make, the past practices of the Finance Committee is to do exactly this type of a thing. And it's also part of our charter, which is we're allowed to do this. So I don't have a problem with the transfer, and I'd make a motion to accept the transfer as submitted.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. I'm going to take a roll call vote. Robert,
Aye.
George,
Right?
Stephanie,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Jack. Jack, you're on mute.
Aye.
Did I get everybody? I'm sorry.
No. Sarah,
Sarah, I'm sorry. I lost my list. Sarah,
aye.
and I am an aye as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dan, any other transfers?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. Looks like we can get back to the presentation. It appears in front of us. So Sandy, take it away.
Thank you. And thank you, Pat, for finding that. As we took, okay, we're in fiscal 2022 now, and these are our recommendations at a glance. We reviewed over 35 items totaling $3.7 million this year. And we were able to recommend 30% of the overall capital request and approximately 70% of the levy eligible items. We did see a little less items this year, probably due to what's been going on, and with COVID, the department heads only put in what they really needed. So we had a few less items, but we still do not have any remaining money out of the $1.5 million to recommend to move into the capital stabilization fund at this time. So as I said, we used our entire $1.5 million. From enterprise funds, we have $955,000. That's the water department. Fire department, $989,000. On roadways, $1,820,870. And an item that we're really have not indicated a funding source yet. It may be borrowing, maybe free cash. We will have more conversation with administration on this. Is $601,377. And this is an upgrade at a water department building to comply with state law for the storage of town records. So that item we feel is important. How it will be funded, or if it can be put off for another year, we'll have future discussion on. From free cash, we are recommending 6 items. 3 of the items you're going to recognize, they were recommended last year, but did not make the cut because all the capital was deferred. So our total recommendation this year is for $6,012,507. Getting into the list of the items from the levy, this is the list that we usually spend more time on. Many of these items are either reoccurring or were presented to you last year. Last year, you did see a recommendation for cruiser replacements. We feel that this year we recommend the whole amount that the chief asked for, which will replace 4 vehicles. They were able to replace A few vehicles last year with insurance money, but we don't want to see them getting behind on their replacement plan. The Taser replacement you saw at town meeting for the first year. This is a 5-year appropriation, which we do need to have another discussion on, because as you know, any lease program that goes 5 years needs town meeting approval. So right now we are recommending the second year, but the funding source and the amount may change after we talk to the finance department. The firearm shooting trailer we recommended last year for $100,000. We did have questions at the selectmen's meeting because we also recommended, as we did last year, for an additional amount coming from free cash. So we do need to have a discussion with the chief on this one to find out what the other funding sources may be to reach the $750,000. So if we put up some money, that it doesn't just get stuck out there and not be able to fund the whole item. On good news, the radio system upgrades, which you've seen the last 2 or 3 years in a row, this will be the last appropriation. $100,000 is recommended for the final amount to upgrade the radios. The next item is a crew cab pickup. This actually is a new item. The Natural Resources got one truck at the recent special town meeting. This is an this vehicle has 141,000 miles on it, and we felt of the 2 vehicles they were asking for, that this one was in poorer condition and had more mileage, and we recommended that. The next item, patrol boats, engines used for emergency responses are in poor condition, so we recommended those items. Dredging is reoccurring. We saw it at special town meeting. On this particular one, since we were short on money, we were not able to give him the whole $75,000. So if more money becomes available, we would recommend the full amount on that. But right now we're only recommending $54,119. The next item is new. It's replacing a 2007 poor condition motor. We do recommend that. And the next item you saw last year from the highway department is to replace a dump truck for $195,000. That was recommended last year and was deferred due to COVID-19. On the next item is also reoccurring. You saw some of it at the special town meeting. We are recommending $25,000 for HVAC repairs for various buildings. The town hall front and side doors will be more energy efficient, less maintenance. And this item also was on this annual town meeting last year. For $30,000, we do recommend that. The next 2 items were also on the annual town meeting, the drinking fountain upgrades and the bumper and rake field. We recommended those last year, and they were deferred at the annual town meeting. And the same with the Peter Homer Park softball field. Removing the clay and replacing it with stone dust was also recommended last year. The next item, the mower. We did not recommend this last year, but we do this year. It replaces the oldest mower, and that mower will go to the highway department to be also used for the highway for side road mowing, things like that. The front end loader was recommended last year. It's 29 years old, from the in the cemetery department for $20,000. The next 2 items were recommended last year, but you also saw them at the special town meeting for the same dollar amounts. This is a replacement plan, a 5-year replacement plan for PCs and infrastructure. So we recommend those. The townwide telephone system was also recommended last year. The lease expires at the end of this year, so we highly recommend that. And the last 2 items you see from the school department have been on the list for quite a while. One of them we recommended last year, the other we rated quite high, but we didn't have it. One, we didn't have enough money, and we also weren't sure what the town of Dennis was doing. But this year we hear that they are funding the DY energy management system, so we do recommend that. So that total is $1.5 million from the levy limit. Next page. Thank you. From the water department. We recommended all 5 items. The first one is well redevelopment for 4 or 5 of the 24 wells. On the next item was actually came to us in 2 items, but by bundling it together, it saves the town a significant amount of money. So this is replacement of the water main from Dennis to Barnstable in conjunction with the Mass DOT paving. The next item is to purchase some 10 parcels on Higgins Crow for a land acquisition for future wells. The next item is replacing of failing meters, which if they do fail, it's a revenue loss to the town. So we feel that it's important that they keep up to date on replacing the meters. Final item is a vehicle replacement with an F-250. The current one has 161,000 miles on it. So we do recommend all 5 of those items from retained earnings in the water department. The next item is the roadways. You saw at the special town meeting, the roadways was deferred last year and it's funded by free cash. We recommend to get back to the levy limit. So we do recommend the roadway improvements for $1.3 million, the stormwater for $230,625. But the next item is new and it is in the 5-year plan. Every other year in the 5-year plan to work. It's for sidewalk improvements. We have 37 miles of sidewalks, and we feel it's important that we do put some money out for sidewalk improvements. These items come from ambulance receipts. Last year, we did not recommend the dive equipment. We asked that he wait 1 more year, in which he did. We do recommend it. It has leakage issues, and it's important for safety concerns that we get that replaced. The next item will need some more discussion on the funding of replacing the pumper. It's $750,000. It's 25 years old. It has 111,000 miles on it. We do recommend replacing this pumper, but we need to have a discussion with administration on whether it would be a combination of ambulance funds or borrowing internal or external, and we will have that conversations for our final presentation in February at the public hearing. The next item is replacing a 10-year-old 4-wheel pickup truck for $65,000. And the next one is a 12-year-old replacing a Ford Escape with 100,000 miles on it with an SUV 4-wheel drive. Both are used for emergency response. The next item is replacing breathing apparatus 12 units due to age and condition. So even though we recommended $989,000, we're not sure if that total amount will come from the ambulance fund, depending on the decision on the pumper. We have 6 items from free cash, 3 of which you saw last year were also recommended from free cash. The 3 from free cash last year were the finance clerk's voting tabulators. That item was recommended last year. We have to replace all 8 tabulators at the same time because they all have to be consistent. Another item from free cash last year was the PD furniture and also the PD Celebrate tech system. Those items were recommended last year from free cash. New this year are a couple items for recreation, the portable safety radios and two-way radios used by the lifeguards, the camp staff, and the seasonal staff to communicate with the police, the fire, and the Department of Natural Resources. The current radios have very high repair costs. The second item is to address vandalism that has been in graffiti. It's been an issue at Flax Pond. Those are security cameras that will tie in with the police department. Cash. There were a few items that we did not recommend, partly because of lack of funding. Others we needed more information on. The natural resources 4x4 350 cab pickup, we did not recommend. We recommended the other vehicle. They said they just received one at the special town meeting. We've asked for more information for the last couple of years on the Lewis Bay flushing study. We recommended last year that it be more of a regional effort, but I guess we're not getting a response from Barnstable on that. But we looked also for a scope of services on both that and the Long Pond study. We're not really sure what we're getting for that 120,000 and the 90,000. The navigation boys and the police station carpeting, although we would like to recommend them, we're hoping that they can get one more year out of those due to budget constraints. And the same with the software licensing or applications. We feel it's important to stay up to date, but we had to make some cuts and not recommend everything. And that just happened to be one of the runs that were rated a B that could be deferred one more year. Channel 18 infrastructure replacement and also the townwide fiber network replacement. We deferred pending negotiations with Comcast. And several items were withdrawn. The server revitalization and the Bayberry Hills Golf Course repairs were withdrawn. So projects, large projects like the Run Pond revitalization and the coastal infrastructure, we did receive questions on those items by the Board of Selectmen, and we will be meeting with Ed and with administration to come up with a plan, some type of plan on the coastal infrastructure repairs. And we will be presenting that after the holidays. So we did give you a copy of.
Hold on. Can I just go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
The expenditure for software licensing and applications. What software are we talking about?
I mean, I can get the detail in the book. Hold on.
I mean, you know, what I'm getting at is just stuff like licensing for Microsoft Office that everybody needs, or is this some esoteric piece of software that one or two people use?
We did receive some money at the special town meeting. Maybe Ed can help me with this one.
Sandy, it lists quite a few different ones just as examples. So it does list Microsoft licenses, Windows servers, Windows Server, user, VMware licenses. So it does list quite a few, although we didn't get any hard end dates on when certain licenses were coming.
Well, I mean, Microsoft is done on an annual basis, so you know, if it'll run out at the end of the year, you won't have it.
That's a question.
Yeah.
If I don't currently, we do not have an IT director. I believe that position has not been filled yet. So
Sandy, I'm on the call. I can take that. So we're investigating moving over to the Microsoft Cloud opportunity, and that's going to take a significant amount of money. So the licensing money that would go with that would go to pay for the cloud activity. There is some other licenses that we have for software programs that we need to pay for, and it's all bundled in there, including the software for the telephone system.
So we're not limiting the ability for people to do their work at their desk every day.
No, I mean, you know, so the town is way behind to some degree on its operating system. So one of the things that Microsoft recently has done is provided a government rate, if you will, for being able to induce or entice communities to move to the cloud and then get rid of the annual licensing problem that we've had to try to maintain. So that's a big ticket item for us. We're still evaluating the total cost, but it's within our range to be able to make that migration. We're starting with an email server migration, should be done over the winter time. From there, we can start doing the rest of the Microsoft Office products.
Okay, yeah, all right. I just want to make sure we weren't.
No, you know, George, to your point, you know, we had the big flood a few years ago that wiped out our server farm in the basement at Town Hall. And as part of the recovery effort with the insurance company, I think the loss was over $500,000 on that. They encouraged us to get off of physical servers, and we're trying to do that as quickly as possible. And we did relocate to new server farm on the main floor of Town Hall to avoid that problem from ever happening again.
Okay, I'm sure somebody's looked at this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just 140,000 jumped out at me, and then I want to make sure that on January 1 or January 2, everybody had access to.
Oh, no, yeah, it's,
spreadsheet and
we're
word
good.
processes and whatever you need. Okay.
Thank you, Dan, for answering that. All right, so we on the next slide, we did give you a 5-year capital improvement plan with detail. It's based on the 5-year plans that we received from the departments. But we also, in that department's plan, we pull out any projects that are over $1 million, just to give the board and the finance committee an idea of what projects are out there that may have been talked about. They definitely need more discussion and more vetting on the larger projects, on how the town would fund those. But that's in the next slide on the 10-year plan. These are some projects that have been discussed. No decisions have been made on them, and there will be more discussion on these in the future. And as I said, the questions that we did receive on the Hvac repairs, we will be meeting in the next couple weeks with administration and with Ed to see if we can come up with some way that we can start funding the coastal infrastructure repairs. So on our last slide, we just talked about a little bit about some of the challenges we find each year. We feel we have inadequate funding within the levy for the amount of departments that depend on that funding source. And we've asked over the last couple of years if it was possible to increase that by 2.5% as we do the road money, just so we don't get behind. We often see reoccurring capital items such as dredging, cruises, HVAC repair. HVAC repair is something that the department really needs some type of money in their budget for that. And we ask that the finance committee possibly look at the capital within the budget, and when it's possible to put some money back in for smaller capital and routine capital. Sometimes projects are presented to us that need more policy decisions. This year, we didn't see too many this year, and we did last year, but as I said, we got a smaller list this year. But sometimes, projects come to us and they really haven't been discussed between the finance committee and the board. We've often asked for an annual appropriation for waterways, and as I said, we will be talking about that over the next 2 weeks. And also talk about how we could possibly bundle a few larger projects, maybe that storage facility that we spoke about, and fund that over the next 5 to 10 years. We will be working on updating the 2006 vehicle replacement policy. These are our preliminary recommendations. We understand any revenue shortfalls that the town may have, and we will be working over the next several weeks to do our final recommendations at the February town public meeting on February 23rd. So we're here to answer any questions. We will send the correct memo to you. We apologize for that. But if you do have any questions on any particular item, if you don't have the questions tonight, or you want to send them along to Pat, we'll find out the answers for you. But as you know, many of these items that we are talking about, you saw last year, and they were deferred. I'm not sure who's talking.
Background noise. Madam Chair, I have sent the appropriate PowerPoint now to the committee members.
Okay, what about the memo?
The memo they received, and they said that was a correct memo.
Oh, it was. Oh, I thought they said it was 2000. Maybe it was the PowerPoint that said 19. All right.
Yeah, it was a PowerPoint, I believe.
No,
The
no, the
memo was incorrect.
memo was, everything was for 2000, it was last year's.
I will look into that now.
And took me about 20 minutes to realize I was looking at useless information.
Great.
Sandy, I'd like to open the questions to the committee if anybody has any, which I'm sure they will. Questions, please. Anybody? Comments? Okay, well, I have a couple questions. Some of those at the early stage of the presentation, such as the $100,000 for the firing range, or the trailer rather, that was deferred. We approved that last year, is that correct, or did we not do that?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, I met with your chair,
Yep.
Mr. Moody.
Yep.
And I met with the police chief and had a discussion on that. And both the finance committee and the capital budget committee recommended that item to move forward with other funding sources that perhaps they could raise some money away. And we never got to that point because it was deferred at town meeting.
Right, so I guess I'm just curious about the logistics. We're, trying to figure out how everything kind of works in this world. So that money that was approved out of that 1.5 million, did that money go back into free cash, or what happens to that money that we approved that got deferred?
It goes back to free cash.
That's okay. All right. So any of those ones that you mentioned that we had prior approved, the money just goes back to free cash, and now they've come back and asked for it again, which makes sense. Okay.
I think that's probably why the free cash was so high this year.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then I guess my other question would be the $1.5 million that we allocate, or that you allocate. How many years has it been $1.5 million? I mean, it seems to me that having that 2.5% escalator would make lots of sense, because a dollar today is not going to be the same dollar in a year or two. So
I've been on the committee for at least 4 years, and it's been the same. I can't really answer how far back it goes.
Right. Okay.
But I think it was after the roads were voted in 2013 that they, so, 4 or 5 years at least.
Yeah, which is probably too long to keep money at a static figure. Okay, thank you. I'm opening up. Any questions?
On the same idea, how do we come up with 1.5 million? Why do we have a fixed amount at all? It would seem that it would depend. Wouldn't it be better to be flexible? Capital projects instead of essentially having an arbitrary limit that causes us to make decisions within that limit and not deal with things that might well be over it. I just think it's an unnecessary obstruction in the decision-making process.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
I don't know the whole history of how the 1.5 came to be what it is as a number, but as a for instance, I do know that there had been a line in the budget for capital expenditures for some number of years, and during the recession, in some years after that, a while back, that evaporated, if you will, because that money that was put away for capital was instead either cut from the budget because it was a budget decline, or left for operating funds. And slowly, the Board of Selectmen have a policy on this, and that's where since I've been here anyways, it's part of their annual policy directive on the budget. We've worked, and it was in the budget prior to my arrival, maybe for 1 or 2 years, to get back to 1.5 million. So I think what Sandy had raised, and we've had a bit of a conversation with the Finance Committee about this in the past. Some number of communities would look at our debt equation here in town and say, well, they're amazed that we've gotten so far without having very little debt on the books. And so instead of borrowing municipal bonds, if you will, the town Board of Selectmen had made a policy directive to try to do as many things as possible through cash. And a good example of that's what happened at the water department, where capital of massive magnitude began to be deferred, but other capital items were paid for through cash. And so Jeff Colby recently, over the last couple of years, has identified, and I think he's done a fine job identifying all the capital needs, and they're massive for the town of Yarmouth. And he came up with a financing plan that incorporates some cash and some long-term borrowing and using a rate structure to pay for that so that the backlog can be cleared. So I think, to your point, George, that some combination of these types of conversations need to occur at the finance committee level, the capital budget, and the Board of Selectmen. And in general, you have to get comfortable with the concept of borrowing money to pay for big ticket items. And in the past, the town, for a lot of different reasons, has been hesitant to do that. So I think, as you've seen, and if you spend more time on the finance committee, there's nothing probably more frustrating than year after year kicking the can down the road. And I think one of the big challenges that has cleared us for now anyways is, as long as the DY school budget was as problematic to us as it was very hard to do anything new or creative. Now that the financing formula seems to have resolved itself, we might be able to have that opportunity now to look at different finance vehicles to chip away at this. And as a for instance, because I haven't put a lot of thought into this, but say that you wanted to bundle a number of big ticket items together. The total cost was $5 million over 10 years. And the debt service, say, was some number, 300,000 or $250,000 a year. You could carve that out of the levy to pay for that over the course of 10 years, say. And then in the future, like in the community where I came from in Westfield for 50 years, there was always a band within the operating budget to pay for debt service. So whenever a big project came along, one would fall off the books and you'd add a new one on. And so we, on at the time I was there, $120 million budget, somewhere between $5 and $7 or $8 million a year was principal and interest payments for capital projects, and we never had overrides. So there's a variety of different ways to do it. They're complicated, but in the end, if you get away from cash, you got to get comfortable with borrowing.
Dan, can you let us, do you have any idea, notwithstanding the DPW building and the school building, what is our current debt? I know that we have,
I want to say it is minuscule. Ed would know it to the number, but it's not much at all, because don't forget, those items are debt exclusion. So those go right to the taxpayers, those three schools. Right. So for what we have on the books, I want to say, it is probably under $1 million, maybe.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
We should be taking advantage of this.
I'll look it up right now and give you the number.
Yeah. There's two schools of thought, and I hear what a lot of people say. So one of the things is like operating leases, as a for instance. Some people don't like leasing because there's a carrying cost associated with that. But what's really become popular in the municipal arena has been lease to own option. So after like 5 years, you get to own it. Leasing of electric vehicles makes a lot of sense, because if we lease them, the leasing entity can take advantage of the tax credit. We can't as a public entity. So leasing cars like hybrids and full EVs makes a lot of sense. And I think, with the cost of borrowing money on the municipal bond market now, if you were going to try to do something, now would be the time to do it. And if you didn't want to hit the taxpayers on it, you'd have to work it into the levy. But now's the time, because the cost of municipal borrowing is very low.
Agreed. Thank you. So do we have any other questions for the committee?
Several.
Okay.
I'm sure you're all shocked. But Dan, I would like to circle back maybe at the end of this conversation, just about if we were to explore that,
yeah, what
our next steps would be.
Okay.
So let's circle back to that. So thank you all. Thank you, Sandy, and the rest of the committee. Nice to see you, meet some of you. I'm the new vice chair of the committee and also new to the committee. So some of these questions may be, just me being new, but I have some questions about, okay, so the 10-year plan and the 5-year plan, how much of it is a plan per se, so much versus like, this is just what the departments are saying that they anticipate that they would want or need?
Well, let me give you a quick answer on that, because Sandy had mentioned it a number of times in her conversation. So when you talk about anything associated with the revetment walls and Lewis Bay study, that's what I'd call a wild guesstimate, if you will, as a placeholder. There has not been any significant hard and fast engineering service retained to determine what the actual cost would be. So one of the things that was discussed at the Board of Selectmen's meeting when the capital budget committee came in front of them is perhaps the next step on those particular environmental items would be to quote the work that we're looking to have done, and from an engineering firm perspective, get that number and go to town meeting so that you can kind of bring that to some logical conclusion for financing, because right now you couldn't finance that. So a lot of it to that degree is speculative by the departments as to what their cost is. There's been, and I'll be honest with you, in the 4 years I've been here, other than if we didn't have COVID this past year, that was the first year in many, many years where there was some breathing room to do something like that, because the DY debt service for us for the annual enrollment costs was crippling to the town. So COVID aside, I mean, I think you need to start saying, and all those items on that list, which are the actual priorities to the town. So you have those now in front of you. The Board of Selectmen have them, capital budget has them, administration has them, and it would be worth the dialogue to say, you know, what are the things that we have to get done now, or in 5 years, or in 10 years. And I'll give you, for instance, though, I took one off that had been on there for a while, and it was worth $700,000, and it was to purchase our own institutional fiber network for the town. So there's no need to carry that anymore, even though we had actually had pretty good numbers. We'd ran the numbers on that with a contractor on the mileage on connecting all our town buildings. But there's an alternative way to get around that, which was a lower monthly lease payment potentially with Comcast. So I took that off, and there's no need for us to be in the fiber business. So each one of those items that are on there needs to have a certain level of due diligence done on them to get to the point where we would have confidence on a number. But a lot of it has to do with what is that priority. I mean, we're a seacoast community. The state's putting a lot of money into seacoastal protection. I think it would behoove us to probably begin taking a strong, hard look and evaluate, using a service perhaps like the Woods Hole Group to evaluate, based on, worst to first, what would be the place to spend your money on initially. I know, like in Robert's neighborhood, there's a lot of water that comes in over during not even really high tide so much anymore. Just we got a bad culvert down there, and we got some elevation problems. But that's an area, there's some property damage potentials of magnitude down there that, right now, the way we're going, we'll never be able to address that. But it's that kind of granular type detail that needs to be added to many of these projects.
So it sounds like a lot of what's put on there is, what the departments would like to have, right? But it's not necessarily been scored plan. It's not necessarily a plan. It's so much as this is what we think we need, and this is how we're suggesting we should spread it out. So going, one of the questions that I had when I looked at the spreadsheet is, and this is probably an Ed question, but if we were to take everything on that list, I think it was like 242 million or something like that, and then subtract out things that have, revolving funds, Chapter 90 funds, short-term rentals, whatever the pay for is, how much left over of that are we trying to pay for in the tax levy? What I'm trying to do is get a sense of what is the overall capital,
The need through the levy. How much is that? That's a really good number. A good question, because what I can tell you is no matter what community you're in, you're always going to have way more needs than you have money. And decisions have to be made by all committees every year on this topic. But what's that magic number? We haven't investigated that to that level. How much do you, like Jeff came to you in front of you, and he gave you an analysis of the roadway system. So that's an infrastructure, that's capital. And he knows, based on a mathematic formula that factors in road mileage, type of traffic, weatherization, and all these things, that you have to spend a certain amount of money on that asset every year to keep it scored in whatever range you're looking to do. And if you want to step it up and improve your quality of roads, there's a matching dollar value. I mean, that is a rare scenario that any other thing in the town that we have. Like, we have all these historical assets. We're dealing with some significant structural problems at the barn at Taylor Bray Farm and at the Baxter Grist Mill. Those are going to need some serious dollar values to fix those. And, you know, in the grand scheme of, like, you know, priorities, well, you could always close the buildings up, and if they collapse and nobody's in them, nothing happens to them, you know. Or do we fix revetment walls? I mean, so it's that level of diligence on all these items that the citizen groups have to, like the Finance Committee, Capital Budget, and the Board of Selectmen have to have real hard numbers in front of them so they can make those kinds of decisions. So like on Baxter Grist Mill and on the barn at Taylor Bray Farm, we actually have engineering work being done to get you to a number, have the number presented to you, and then you can make a decision if you want to spend money on that.
Dan, you may recall, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, we put together a plan to show the spikes in the tax rate and the borrowing that would be needed based on all of the projects that were done, something that Rich presented. So we've done that in the past. And I think, as Dan indicated, and perhaps most of you know, we can't just increase the $1.5 million to whatever we want. We have to live within the constraints of Proposition 1.5 or 2.5. And if we want to do more than that, then we may have to go out and borrow. So, you know, that's, you know, when they talk about this sales and revetments, and this is a wish list number, set of plans that tell us what are you going to fix, when are you going to fix it, and how much is it going to cost. Then we can put together a debt schedule that follows that along, and we can do it, as you indicate, Stephanie, all of our projects, and we can see what fits within the tax levy and what doesn't. You know, so, you know, we're adding even just the $250,000 worth of sidewalks. That's a new item. We have to see if that even fits within the tax levy this year, depending on what we do with local receipts. So again, as Dan indicated, we have some great opportunities because Dan and others fixed the school problem. But, you know, we still don't, unless we do overrides, we can't just fit more into the tax levy if we're going to be constrained by Proposition 2.5.
Sure.
And a lot of the borrowing we didn't do, the putting of money in the levy started in 2012. It disappeared with some of the school enrollment changes, and we had to build it back up. But a lot of that borrowing was being preserved for wastewater. So we were trying to preserve the debt drop-off into a capital fund so that we could actually pre-fund wastewater. So there were reasons why it went down, and, you know, there were no approvals for the DPW garage, for wastewater, and some of these larger initiatives. And that at the time was the #1 priority, but we're still trying to look at how to fund that particular project.
So I understand it's not an easy question to answer, and we don't have to answer it tonight, but I would appreciate it if, you know, Ed, maybe if you could pull out that report that Rich did, if we could just start to get a handle, because I think what I hear you all saying is that we need to be able to, you know, get a handle, prioritize, you know, but for me, the first step in figuring out, you know, prioritization is how much you have to work within, and that, you know, it can be the overall year to year limit, but you also need to know how much you actually need. Like, that's for me, step one. So I'd really appreciate it if, you know, if maybe Ed, you could dig into that.
We'll give you a copy of the report. What didn't happen after that was the prioritization. Again, because of where the tax rate went and other factors, wastewater, the school problems, some of those other things. So there needs to be a prioritization step.
I understand that,
So-
and
so
that's
we-
fine. I just want a ballpark idea of if you've got $242 million in requests.
Yep.
Approximately, like just ballpark, is it 100 million that would have to come out of
Yeah.
the tax levy? Is it 50 million? I have no idea. And just getting a ballpark idea helps
Yeah.
then to prioritize.
Right,
So we can move on, but I wanted to put that out there that, maybe at the next meeting or the following meeting, if we could get some more information on that, I think it would be
I will
helpful.
deliver the old report at the next meeting, but
Awesome.
not all of the items that people have on their wish list are in the capital budget list. So we would need to go back and assemble all of those. What are we gonna do with ME Small? That's not on the list at all, right? So that's bigger than a bread box. So, we need to do a better cataloging of this, even though somebody hasn't submitted those requests, we need to include them. So I can't give you something next week or the week after. What I can give you is what was done before and what those implications were. And then what we need to do is spend some period of time looking at all of the town's capital needs.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple other questions, more of a comment, actually probably more for Pat, that just looking at that 5 and 10-year plan, the golf figures to me do not look real. It's like 345,000 every year with one exception. So I just would like to say, maybe in like, can we do maybe like next year, make sure there's like more of those numbers just don't seem real to me.
There's been a lot of deferred capital there as well because their receipts hadn't been in excess of expenses for years. But there are definitely specific projects in terms of irrigation systems, clubhouse renovations, and that sort of thing that we can break down and give to you for sure.
And that also could be their lease payments. They have an average lease payments each year, an estimate over the next 5 years.
Right, for their equipment, their mowing equipment and some of their other, and all their carts are leased and that sort of thing. So that Sandy's right, there's that as well.
Okay. And then Sandy, I saw your comments to the selectmen and I think you mentioned it tonight as well as, coastal waterways really should have its own source of revenue. Do you have any thoughts on that at this point? And I guess, again, for Dan, if we were to really kind of dig into that and start to explore what some options would be, what would be the next steps? Would we have another joint meeting of this committee, a subcommittee working group? What would be the best way to approach that?
As I said, we will be working with Ed over the next 2 weeks before the holidays to come up with some type of recommendation on that. Committee did over the last couple years suggest we look at it similar to the roads with a possible override, but this may not be the year for that. So we will have to look at it in the next couple of weeks and get you more information on that particular item. But it is a question from the board and it needs to be answered prior to our public hearing.
Okay.
Stephanie, I think you specifically asked about a revenue source.
Mhm.
I think Sandy did indicate maybe levy or borrowing. What we've been trying to do since 2012 is come up with additional revenue sources to fund wastewater. So we really haven't looked, and we've been, just beating the bushes as much as we can just for that particular purpose, not to increase the tax levy for wastewater. So we just haven't spent a lot of time other than, the fact that if it's needed, we would need to borrow it because we still need to come up with new revenue sources for wastewater.
Yeah, I mean, and I know it's not super popular, but I tend to go towards beach fees as being one source, but that's certainly not going to cover everything. It's going to cover a minuscule amount. So I think I've, kind of taken up my time in terms of questions. I'll just sort of say to the Capital Budget Committee, thank you for, all your hard work on this. I will say my initial reaction to what you presented is that I don't feel that we are out of COVID in terms of both COVID itself and the economic aspects of it. I think this is going to go on for a while. So in general, you know, I would have sort of the approach of like, yeah, absolutely, you got to invest in a lot of these things, but I am feeling a bit of hesitation to kind of go back to the level of spending that we were at before COVID. You know, or the full 1.5 million at this point in time. But you know, we have a few months, I think, to kind of see what the metrics are to gauge that. But thank you all so much for your hard work.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes, go ahead.
It's not a lot of money, but a couple of years ago at town meeting, and Ed probably has a little bit more detail than I do, the town meeting passed a provision that allowed a certain percentage of the, I believe it was the daily visitor beach pass to go into a revenue fund with the idea that I think it's like the Beach Capital Improvement Fund. So, you know, to your point, Stephanie, I think one of the things as it relates to, you know, all the liabilities we have along the coast, to some degree, I think there's some commentary that would say that, well, all the folks that enjoy the waterfront maybe should participate a little bit in the cost of maintaining and upkeep of that. So that activity a couple of years ago was the first step. And it's now, I was reading some emails from the state. It's very close to being passed. It was a home rule petition through the legislature, and it'll be up and active shortly. So right now it's baby steps. I forget how much money as a percentage goes in every year, but when it gets set up, but you're on the right track, if you will, as it relates to, you know, how are some of the ways to do this if the levy is a constraint to you. So.
Any other further questions? No? Okay. Sandy and the rest of the committee, thanks for coming in this evening. We really appreciate the time you spent with us.
Okay, thank you.
Look forward to working with you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
So Dan, I think we just heading towards new business. Do we have anything on the agenda we need to add?
No, just that the budget books will be generated. Pat's working on that for the December 15th meeting in front of the board will be when those books will be available. So they'll be out very soon, and that'll be our first pass, you know, and just as you look through it, bear in mind that to Stephanie's point, yeah, I would agree with her that we're a long way from being out of this, with the exception of short-term rentals. Most of our other receipts are not performing as well as we would have anticipated in a normal year. So the budget draft that'll be generated on the 15th is simply just that. I think as you get closer to town meeting and more is known about particularly excise tax numbers and property tax collections, there'll be an opportunity, just like there was last spring, to make a decision as to, can we keep capital at 1.5? Can we do the roadway, or should we defer that again to keep operating budget intact and then try to do those things in the fall with free cash? So similar strategy as last year, we've been very judicious on our position hirings for spending to try to generate as much possible free cash so that provides you the maximum amount of flexibility next fall. If you decide to do a deferment like was done this past spring, because to Stephanie's point, we're a long way from coming out of this thing in good shape. So,
Dan,
yes.
how far behind are we on taxes?
I'll defer that to Ed, but it's the rate of collection is not as it would be in a normal year. It's not hideous, but it's something to pay attention to for sure.
Thank you.
Ed, do you want to comment on that, or?
Oh, sure, if you would like me to.
Why not?
We're a unique community in the way we handle our taxes. So what we did is follow along with the state law that allowed us to have people not pay any penalties and interest until 6/30. Our real estate levels of collection were $1.6 million behind, and usually we're only a few $100,000. And we've let that play out. We've started to send out demand notices but we're one of the only communities in the state that does tax lien sales. And we do that for second homeowners, basically people that are not residents. And we can turn on the switch to collect this money almost immediately. So I'm not worried about real estate taxes in those collections. We have one of the lowest tax title levels in the state because of how we've managed that over the last 6 or 7 years. So I'm not really worried about tax receipts.
Thank you, Ed.
But they are lower.
Dan, any other, that's it for new business, right? Or
Yep.
anything to comment on?
No.
So I think we just need to, in the next couple weeks, starting in probably January, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, we're probably going to start to have a couple more meetings a week. We'll try to keep them relatively brief, acknowledging everyone's time they're committing to this committee. But we'll start to bring in the department heads, 1 or 2 at a time, perhaps 2 meetings a week until we get through everybody or every committee or department rather. So we will be mindful of everyone's time, though. I think that's important. So if anybody, if there's no other questions or comments, I think we can look for a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
I'm sorry. I did want to circle back on that conversation with Dan real quick, if it's possible. So just, Dan, if we were to start to have that conversation about borrowing, given how low the interest rates are, what would be next steps? Would it be generated from this committee? Would we, how would we approach that?
Well, let me talk to Ed about that later in the week, and we'll generate that report that Rich had done a couple of years ago. And I think partly what it would do is we'd have to get some better intelligence from the departments as to what their most significant, when I'd say short-term need is over the next 5 years, and then take a look at each one of those things and study those as it relates study. When I say, if Carl says it's a revetment activity that's $3.5 million, okay, let's go out and see what the quote is to get an engineering analysis done to see if that actually is the price. We might be surprised that it's not. So I think we need to go into that detail a little bit more closely to be able to ferret that kind of information out for you.
Okay. Yeah, I do think philosophically, like, money is dirt cheap right now.
Yeah.
These capital costs are not going anywhere. They're only going to get more expensive. And as we've learned from wastewater, the longer you kick the can down the road, the more costly it becomes to taxpayers. So I for one would be for exploring that path. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I would certainly be interested in hearing more about that.
On a good news note for everybody, though, I will say that, if you just go back a short amount of time and you looked at the challenges that were in front of the town, the topics that came up included wastewater and no conceivable method to pay for it at the time. The DPW garage building, Mattakey School building, Cape Tech, and then the operating costs associated with DY. And in a very short amount of time, what I would say the most significant near-term capital challenges, the town responded. They all went to town meeting. We've gotten positive votes on those. These things got funded in this upcoming year. I mean, as you saw in tonight's conversation, to Ed's point, almost for the last decade, administrations, mine and the one before me, was fixated on trying to solve the wastewater challenge without hitting the tax levy. And I think we've got a really good workable formula for the future. And, so it's like one of those things, those are huge topics that nobody thought we could clear the deck on. We have now cleared that. And to your point, even though it looks like there's a lot of things to go after, and there are, some of the most significant things this town has faced in a long time have been addressed. So that's something to feel good about. And that took a lot of work to get there. And the taxpayers, they responded when they were shown the information. And it's just, we got to go back to square one again with the next set of challenges for the near term and do the same thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Dan. I think, if you explain things to town meeting voters and people who participate in local elections, they, and lay it out for them, you know, lay out the cost of not doing it. They tend to support it. So, you know, I trust them on that. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, I'd like to make a comment on that as well.
Yes,
You know, it seems to me from my understanding, there's been hesitance to borrow money for these smaller projects.
There has been. I think the town has, it took a really hard tumble back in the recession in 2008 and 9.
Right.
And then with the like I said, I can't even explain to you how nightmarish it was having that DY operating cost over our head every single budget cycle. Because you'd go down this road, you come up with a good plan, and then you'd see, oh, we're going to need somewhere between a $500,000 and $1 million override. And it just would deflate all the wind out of everybody. And that's behind us now for a period of time. I don't want you to think like we don't have to go back and revisit that conversation with Dennis, but at least for the near term, we're in a good place now. And that allows a lot more fresh air to come into the room. So.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know and I think this is kind of the question that Stephanie was asking, what the logistical aspect of getting not just the approval, but even just I've heard Board of Selectmen meetings where it's, they don't want to, certain members wouldn't even want any kind of borrowing at all, even at 1%. So I guess my question is the logistic aspect. How does our committee make a recommendation or go through that? Or
I think that's helpful, but in the end, it comes down to, like Jeff Colby is a very good case study in this. With all the backlog that water had, the water rate study was out there, reorganization study, the master plan. I mean, all these things have been studied over the last 3 years. They finally get to the point where we can share that information with the board. And then the problem Jeff faced was, okay, you don't have enough cash to do it. We haven't raised rates in 25 years. What's your plan? And I think what you saw with Jeff on the water department situation is he came up with a very solid plan that mixes in a more modernized rate structure, some borrowing from reserves. And he's attempting to do something that the town hasn't done in a long time, which is to do a significant amount of borrowing to address a significant capital backlog. So I think it's that level of diligence on it. And if you can find a new revenue source on it, even better. And I think on all the coastal related issues, I think the community needs to have a dialogue about the beach fees. I really, there's some movement or a chance to move there, but if you're going to ever make an impact or get something done, I mean, I always tell people, whether it's $50 million you're asking the taxpayers for or 50,000, it's never easy. But if you hit them with a sound plan and a strategy as to why, they usually respond to it. And you're right, the town has a lot of challenges, and it's incumbent on administrations and the boards, the selectman board, the finance chair, the finance board and the capital budget to work together to put those stuff in front of the voters. I've always taken the position that if you share with them all the things that that need to be addressed and a plan to pay for it, they'll let you know if they can do it or not, or if they think it's important to you, So it's there's a lot of work to be done between now and the springtime for sure. But this will all lay good groundwork for post-COVID Yarmouth, no question about it.
Let's hope. Great. So let's look for that motion to adjourn. I know it was thrown out there by somebody.
I think I had it like George.
I'll second George's motion to adjourn, if it's still valid, Mr. Chair.
I believe it is. So, Robert?
Aye.
Stephanie?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Nate?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. I think that's going to do it, folks.
Thank you.
We're all set. Have a good night, everyone.
Aye.
Take care.